Good evening, everybody. James Hancock here. I'm back to talk about Crimes of the Future, which I just saw down at the Alamo Draft House in Lower Manhattan. And I'm going to do this review in kind of three parts. I'm going to do kind of a totally broad, vague, general kind of impression. Then I'll get into the premise, and then I'll get into specifics. The reason I'm breaking it up that way, you won't be able to understand the specifics unless I give you some details on the premise, but the premise, it's hard to know where the premise ends and spoilers begin, and I know some people are going to want to go in totally cold, so I'm going to divide it up as I described. So let's just start with the basics. This is my favorite David Cronenberg movie since Crash. Basically, my favorite movie by him in 25 years. And while he has made movies since Crash like History of Violence and Eastern Promises that I love, that I've seen many times, Crimes of the Future appeals to my taste. It's got this incredible atmosphere of danger and perversion and just it's boundary pushing in so many ways. And it's so horrific and it's so bleak, but at times such like beautiful storytelling. And it has this kind of eroticism that will take you light years beyond your comfort zone. And at the same time, eroticism that will have you kind of squirming in your seat and gasping out loud and just kind of wanting it all to be over. But it's the kind of movie that you're going to need a strong drink afterwards. I'm drinking hot tea, but I should probably switch to single malt because, this is a movie where it's like that old joke from Anchorman, like that escalated quickly. It escalated very quickly. But lastly, most important of all, like every great work of art, it is imperfect. And I would say it's imperfect in the same way that Videodrome, one of my favorite movies, is imperfect, or Crash is imperfect. Cronenberg's most personal movies, oftentimes he'll struggle with figuring out how to bring them to a close. But there's going to be an infinite number of reactions to how this movie ends. So I won't say that my reaction is going to be necessarily the most prevalent one, but the most obvious takeaway from this movie is that David Cronenberg's creative powers are completely intact. He's old as hell at this point. I think he was born in 1946. 1943. So he's knocking at the door of 80 next year? But his imagination, his wonderful, beautiful, strange, perverted imagination is still firing on all cylinders. It's still going strong. And I eagerly look forward to what his next movie might be. I thought this would be his kind of mic drop moment. He would walk away. But he's got some movie called The Shrouds that he's working on. And Vincent Cassel is going to star in it. Vincent Cassel was in Eastern Promises as well as Dangerous Method. So I have a feeling, Cronenberg's going to keep on working until his decaying body finally gives out on him. And who knows, maybe he won't even die. He'll just metamorphosize into some strange insect and just fly away to some alien world. It wouldn't surprise me at all if all of his movies have been leading toward some next stage in human evolution for this singular, unique filmmaker. But maybe that's all I can say before discussing the premise. So if you want to go in totally cold, bail out now, but just know that if your taste in Cronenberg leans toward the more horrific, and that would be Shivers, Rabid, The Brood, Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly, Dead Ringers, Crash, you know what I'm talking about with his edgier films, then you're going to be very happy with Crimes of the Future. Where it ranks in terms of his all-time great movies is going to be difficult to say because, as I'll get to later on, in a lot of ways this movie feels like the culmination of so many ideas that are at play in some of his earlier movies, almost like this is the logical extension of those ideas or like the latest iteration of those ideas. So for people who love... people use the word body horror very frivolously, and oftentimes I feel like they use it in a misplaced way or misguided way where it doesn't really apply. But if you're a fan of that side of Cronenberg's cinematic vision of the world, then Crimes of the Future is going to be fascinating to you. So, need a tea break. I'm feeling shell-shocked in a good way from this experience. So this is going to be my section on the premise. So once again, if you want to go in totally cold, bail out now. But the premise is, in the not so distant future, the human race is starting to change, and some people describe it as accelerated evolution syndrome, and there's a bunch of different variations on that, but basically the human bodies are starting to change for a variety of reasons, probably because most of the characters, at least in this movie, live in this state of urban decay and like industrial waste, and it's just a very synthetic kind of gross environment. I don't think there's a single thing that's growing in this entire movie, like a blade of grass or a tree. The only thing that's growing are all these new organs in people. And these new organs, the big debate is this the next stage in human evolution? Or are these just cancerous tumors running wild that are going to kill people? And there's a wide range of interpretations. And at the core of this debate is this couple, these performance artists played by Viggo Mortensen and Léa Seydoux. And Léa Seydoux's character is loosely based on this 1970s performance artist, Gina Payne, who I know very little about, apart from the fact that she would do things like burn herself in public and things like that. But the way they do their works of art, at home, she will examine all the organs that are growing in Viggo's body. She will tattoo them, and then they throw these really kinky, exclusive parties where people, dressed in very luxurious fashion will show up and drink champagne and watch the surgeries as she removes the organs from his body. And then they'll sit there in the middle of this cocktail party with the little tattooed organ in a jar on display like they've just given birth to the latest Picasso. And everybody's like, ah. But another aspect of this new world, apart from people developing new organs, they are losing the ability to experience pain, and they're also losing the ability to basically get infected. Like, nobody's washing their hands anymore. It's a very dirty world. It's just a filthy world, and that's probably part of the problem or part of the solution, depending upon how you want to look at it. But one of the ways people can get off now, or one of the ways they prefer to get off, because their pain receptors are so kind of nullified, they will cut into each other. And you don't have to be a surgeon to do it. People in alleyways will just sit around, instead of making out and like feeling each other up, they'll just start carving into each other. And at these parties, when they're watching these surgeries get underway, people get turned on. Like in the trailer, Léa Seydoux has this famous bit where she's talking to somebody who's just had all these giant gashes carved into her face. And she's like, oh, like while watching you, I wanted to have my face carved open. People get really turned on by this stuff, and as Kristen Stewart's character famously says in the trailer, surgery is the new sex. And it's funny, for fans of the old sex, like myself, there are some parts of this movie to get turned on by. I mean, Léa Seydoux is just so goddamn beautiful, and she seems to be becoming increasingly daring and just more creative and more adventurous with each role that she accepts. She reminds me quite a bit, or she's starting to have a career that resembles that of Isabelle Huppert, and Isabelle Huppert might be my favorite living actress, and she has often courted danger and controversy throughout her career, making movies like The Piano Teacher. And if you've never seen The Piano Teacher, hunt it down. It's a whopper. But Léa Seydoux, she and Viggo Mortensen are just fascinating in this movie. They have so much incredible chemistry, just discussing art and their process and their various, performances and so on and so forth. You could almost reinterpret this movie as like a love song to the creative process, or whether it's writing books or creating cinema or whatever the case might be, just seeing how they weigh all their various creative choices. Because for Viggo Mortensen, he's not just growing organs and letting himself get hacked open. There's a part of him that is willing these organs into being. He is a creator in his own right. They are true collaborators. But because he's got all these organs growing, as you can see in the trailer, he really struggles to basically just kind of to live like a normal, healthy human being. He's always making all these like horrible sounds. He struggles to breathe. He struggles to eat. I mean, once again, this is all stuff from the trailer. These are not spoilers. But physically, he's very compromised, which is why you see him basically dressed up like a fucking ninja or like a Sith Lord for most of the movie. It's an incredible physical performance by him. And Kristen Stewart, she's outstanding as well. And there's another actor in here who I had never seen before, who I thought did an absolutely fantastic job. And I won't tell you what role he plays because that would be a spoiler. But the actor's name is Welket Bungay. I'm assuming he's French Canadian, perhaps, or maybe just French outright, or no, he's Portuguese Guinean. At any rate, he's an actor, he's a film director, and he's astonishing in this movie, and he's a great kind of wingman for Viggo Mortensen, but you'll have to see the movie to figure out what he's all about. And the last part of the premise that I'll get into, there's a subplot that gradually becomes the main plot of this little boy who was murdered by his mother. It's the very first scene of the movie. And it's very obvious from the word go that this boy is very different. And the big question is he a monster? Is he a creature? Or is he what human beings are becoming in a natural kind of evolutionary way? And the way people interpret what's happening to this little kid causes political divisions. Basically, this whole world, it's so weird because it's not like you just see people like going to and from work. This is like almost like a limbo in some ways, where it seems like people, all they do is live in a state of just abject squalor, or they're at these luxurious parties. It's a fascinating vision of the future. It is a world completely unto its own. It's almost like David Cronenberg thought to himself, if there is a future where all of my best movies have happened, what would that world look like? And that is the world in which this story takes place. But let's start getting into the real nitty-gritties. So first and foremost, this screenplay was written when David Cronenberg was considerably younger. He wrote it before Existenz, so in that strange period between Crash and Existenz. And you can definitely feel the Cronenberg of old at play in this, especially when you have things like Howard Shore doing the score, and his score is just fucking incredible. But what's cool about this is how you can see so many little kind of details, ingredients, and just kernels of ideas from his earlier movies all manifesting themselves in this. I mean, like from Scanners, you've got these mutated humans forming these little political movements and enclaves, and they're almost like little terrorist groups. And from Videodrome, you've got body cavities being opened up like a giant vagina that people are eager to explore and enter bodily or orally, whatever the case might be. I mean, like I said, there's some strange boundary-pushing sexual encounters going on in this flick. And then from Dead Ringers, you have ideas like, what if we have like exhibits and or contests for the most perfectly developed organs, even if those organs might be superfluous, or are they not superfluous? Are they becoming a system, or are they going to become a cancer? And then from Crash, you have this idea of surgery as the new sex. Obviously there it was more about car crashes and violence and death and the way technology has changed the human body. But there's a scene in this movie where Viggo and Leia get into this pod, for lack of a better word. It's part of like it's basically, it used to be, God, it's hard to even just discuss this movie because there's so much about it that's so new. But at one time in the context of this world, there were these devices that were used to perform autopsies on dead people, but they basically resemble almost like giant living computers or like insects, very very close, almost like relatives to some of the computer technology in Existenz. But what Lea Seydoux and Viggo Mortensen have figured out is that this thing that used to be used for autopsies is great for getting it on, and they get in it at one point totally nude, and they just start getting hacked to pieces while they're in an embrace, like the world's biggest smile on their face. They just love it. And it's just incredible how like Lea Seydoux, she's never been shy. I mean, she made bluest the warmest color, but she just keeps getting sexier and hotter and more mature, and just, oh my God, she is just there's a strong case to be made for her as the sexiest actor on the planet right now, and she earns that reputation pretty much every single year. But the strangest and most disturbing stuff in this movie has to do with these people who have voluntarily opened themselves up and changed their digestive system in a way where they can now live off industrial waste and plastic. It's what they prefer. They have these little kind of like synthetic candy bars that they love, and if anybody else tries to eat them, it kills them. But they gobble these things up like fucking popcorn and candy. And this little boy is the first child to be born with the ability to digest the plastic on his own without any modifications. And like, you know, if you like the joke in the movie, if you leave like your wristwatch on the table, he has this gross saliva that's very acidic. He would just gobble that watch up like a snack, and like we see him like chewing on a bucket in the bathroom, just biting off pieces like it's made out of candy. And as it turns out, this group is being kind of analyzed and watched and observed by people who they kind of are cops, but they're not really. I mean, they seem almost more like hipsters than actual cops. And there's this great scene where the character played by Velket Bungay points out this giant tumor that's growing on his side. And he's like, look, it's a growth on my side, but that doesn't make me like Francis Bacon or Picasso. And that's one of the most interesting things, is trying to figure out what is art and what's a cancer, and where do the two worlds divide, and what makes the art of Seydoux and Viggo Mortensen different from stuff that just is killing people outright. And Kristen Stewart is probably the most vocal and enthusiastic kind of appreciator of these new forms of art, and really wants to get in on the action. And she probably doesn't have the talent to be one of the artists, but she's more than happy to have Viggo Mortensen rip into her with all those blades if he is willing. And yeah, she just plays this kinky little character who's just a delight to watch in action. As far as critiques go, my one major critique is that because a lot of the dialogue is kind of like growled and mumbled by Viggo Mortensen, because he's always struggling to swallow and he's struggling to eat, and sometimes it's hard to understand just even what the hell he's talking about. And not the very last scene, but basically the emotional climax of the movie, I don't think I fully grasped or took in all the relevant details to the plot where I have a full understanding of it. So it means I have the perfect excuse to go back and see it again. But it left me with a slightly kind of sort of unsatisfied feeling where I didn't quite know what to make of what was going on. And then the movie has this incredible scene, and then suddenly the movie just stops. And like Crash ended not so abruptly, but it kind of like faded out on a whimper. And I've always found the ending to Crash to be unsatisfying, even if I love the movie. In Videodrome, I mean, Cronenberg himself has joked about how with Videodrome, he started making the movie without a proper ending being written, and he finished the movie without an ending being written. And here we are decades later. The movie still doesn't have an ending. So it's not unusual in Cronenberg's body of work for his movies to have a strange ending that you really have to wrestle with. But I think right now, having only seen it once, that would be my one big criticism. Like, I had no idea that the ending was coming. I was sitting there totally just like entranced and just blown away by what I was watching. And then suddenly, bloop, written and directed by David Cronenberg. I was like, what the fuck? And I kind of looked around the theater, and everybody else was kind of looking around. And I was one of the first people up. But everybody just kind of sat there like, is it really over? Like, how is it possible that it's ending on that scene? So I think I'm going to need a second and third viewing before I can really come to terms with what I think about the ending and how I would compare this to his best work. It's safe to say it's already in the conversation to be included with his most disturbing work, but whether or not I include it alongside a movie like Dead Ringers, which is my favorite by him, that remains to be seen. Dead Ringers might remain my favorite David Cronenberg until the end of time, but who knows? I've seen that movie so many times. I've kind of totally internalized it. I need to internalize this before I really know what I'm thinking about the movie overall. So in conclusion, I just want to say I'm very grateful and appreciative that at age 45, as a film fan, that two of my favorite filmmakers of all time, childhood heroes of mine, are still active and making very daring, groundbreaking work. And that would be Paul Verhoeven, who's making movies like Elle and Benedetta, and now David Cronenberg making movies like Crimes of the Future. It's incredibly satisfying seeing filmmakers who in their twilight years are still able to pull it off, because filmmaking is physically incredibly demanding work. And once your endurance goes away and your stamina goes away or your legs go away, it gets very difficult to make movies. And I'm just thrilled that they have found a way to make it work, and that they have found people to invest in their projects, and that there's still an audience that can appreciate these movies and discuss them and dissect them and so on and so forth. And they're not alone in terms of being older filmmakers. I mean, George Miller, he just went into work on Furiosa, his fifth Mad Max movie, which is yet another cause for celebration. But as far as my personal taste is concerned, Paul Verhoeven and David Cronenberg, they've given me a lot of joy over the years. And they've given me a lot of nice nightmares as well. They just, those are filmmakers who aren't afraid of a little controversy and stirring the pot and being provocative. But when it comes to just style and tone, you know that when you watch their movies, you're in the hands of really, they're master storytellers and they're masters of their craft. And yeah, I mean, film is like music for them, and they're just like a virtuoso musician who can use cinema to basically do whatever the hell they want. And I don't know, maybe that's all I've got to say about this. As you can tell, usually I'm like super hyperactive and just talking about movies. I was stunned for a lot of this movie. Just sitting there in my seat, like sometimes kind of sideways, sometimes kind of like pulling my skin off my head, and just wrestling with this movie. But I couldn't take my eyes off it, and it's definitely the most impressive movie I've seen all year. To call it my favorite of 2022 is going to make me sound like a real sick son of a bitch, but it's definitely, if I were to do a top 10 list right now, it would be number one. But not number one because that I think like you should like pack the whole family into the car and drive out and see it. Like if you want that experience, go see Top Gun Maverick. But goddamn, this is a movie that's going to be talked about for a good long while, and I'll be most curious to hear from the diehard Cronenberg fans, because diehard Cronenberg fans do not all agree on what is his best work, because he's got a huge body of work. He's got a ton of incredible movies, like even movies like The Dead Zone, which is an adaptation of Stephen King. Even that is just a dynamite horror movie. He's got so many great flicks to his name that I really love and adore. But just as a way of bringing this video to a close, I got some good news today that my 1-month trial promotional campaign with Manscaped over with my podcast Wrong Reel was successful, and we're going to continue working together with them as the sponsor of the podcast. And so I want to start pushing the promo code for Manscaped for Wrong Reel more on this channel, because why not? So if you want to have everything below your waist look as smooth and glistening as the head you see before you, go to manscaped.com and look for their performance. I think it's called the Performance 4.0 package, but use the promo code WrongReel in all caps, and I've got a link down in the description below. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed watching it. If so, please remember to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, like the video, share it if you feel so inclined. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend. Hope everyone enjoys seeing crimes of the future. But more importantly, as always, long live the new flesh.